Hello, my name is Doug Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to the first edition of Portsmouth This Week, a weekly discussion with Portsmouth Town Administrator John Clem and other Portsmouth Town officials. This video series will air on local public access TV, Channel 18, and will also be available for viewing anytime through links from the Portsmouth Town website and other selected sites. The purpose of this series is to provide citizens of Portsmouth with a better understanding of what their government is doing, why they are doing it, and what they can do to help. It's produced by local volunteers under the auspices of Town Administrator John Clem, who will be our guest today. John, welcome.
Thank you.
John, you presented an operating budget to the Town Council on Wednesday night that included a budget message from you. Could you review what you said in that budget message?
Yes, Doug. I actually presented to the Council an operating budget, a capital budget, and also a budget policy draft, which the last two we actually don't have in place. My budget message to the Town Council, which is required by our town charter, was designed to be, straightforward and simple in terms of what I have found being a resident of this town all of 1 month now. And that is that there's an unmistakable reality that we're living with beyond our means. Not unlike many communities in both the state of Rhode Island and also nationally. You just try to be everything to everyone. You try to stretch the dollars as much as possible. You just try to do as much as you can in local government, because we are in the business of providing services to our citizens. But the truth is that we have drawn down our fund balance, and we can talk about that a little bit. We have deferred our maintenance of our infrastructure, and we have undertaken some budgetary practices that, if not addressed at this time, could really pose a serious problem in the near future for our community.
Well, do you consider that we're in financial trouble then at this time?
I would say that we're headed in that direction, and certainly a day doesn't go by in Rhode Island that we don't read a front page article about yet another community that has chosen inaction for so long that they are finding themselves staring right in the face of insolvency. And certainly as a professional manager, it is my job to try to do all that we can do to provide advice and guidance to our town council so that that isn't the case. The truth is, I can give you one example. We have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of public roads, and we are not maintaining those roads. And so, as was explained to the council the other night in a workshop, you only can do that for so long, and your financial liability becomes in the tens of millions of dollars. And so if we continue to draw down our fund balance, which is basically our savings account for the community, and if we continue to defer our infrastructure, and if we continue to spend beyond our means, which we're doing, we could wake up in the not too distant future, say in 2 or 3 years, and really be in financial trouble. And that is my core message to the town council. The good news is that we're not Woonsocket or Central Falls or West Warwick yet, but immediate action is necessary for us to take a different path.
It sounds like now is the time to
get
on board with some of these. You also presented in your budget message a capital budget. What exactly is a capital budget, and what does this one contain?
The operating budget is our funds that provide for the day-to-day operations of local government. The capital budget funds infrastructure. It might be improvement to buildings, roads, and any other infrastructure that the town is responsible for. We are blessed with some extraordinary assets. Our ball field, our recreational fields, for example, our stables, all of the various assets that we own. But with that comes a responsibility to maintain those assets. And I've certainly heard from more than a few residents that are frustrated that we don't, or we haven't maintained our assets like we should. And so any community needs a long-range capital plan that designates a certain amount of money every year to basically fix the assets that you have, to repair the roads, to fix buildings and repair ball fields and the like. And so that's what a capital plan is. We haven't had one in Portsmouth, and so I did submit a 5-year capital plan to the council on Wednesday night. And I was very pleased to work very closely with our school superintendent and school committee, and we've incorporated their 5-year plan into a town-wide plan. And so the goal is to demonstrate to the town council before they make decisions what our real financial liabilities are. And without a long-range capital plan, you really can't do that.
Well, you mentioned in the previous your previous answer about the fund balance, our savings account, you called it.
Right.
What is our current fund balance, and what do we have to set aside?
Well, operating the town of Portsmouth is no different than operating a business where there's cash flow issues and there are unforeseen or emergency calamities or emergencies that come at us from time to time. And so just like a family budget should include some savings, and certainly a business budget needs to have money set aside for unforeseen issues, so too does our municipal budget have to have that. Not only is it good financial practice, but our bond rating agencies, for example, look at when they're determining the financial strength of a community, they look at issues such as how much money we have in reserves for those unforeseen issues. And so it becomes very important that we not only have money in reserve, but we have it consistently over a period of time. I hope it never happens in our lifetime, but it isn't unrealistic to think at some point we're going to be staring at a serious hurricane or other natural disaster. Well, the question is, are we ready to handle the financial implications of something like that? And unfortunately, the answer is no. For some time in Portsmouth, we've had a policy of setting aside 8% of the operating budget, which would be about $5 million in reserves. And it's a good basic policy, but unfortunately, we haven't lived up to that policy. Presently, we have only about 4% of our operating budget in reserves. And so when you run into a situation where a landowner or property owner or a group of property owners come into tough financial times and they can't pay their taxes, well, to provide a level of service, you have to draw off your savings account. So, but over the last couple of years, to provide a level of service, we have made decisions to draw down our savings account to 4%. So an immediate goal that I have suggested for the town council is we at least get back to our 8% policy, which is a sound, basic policy. Now, the Government Finance Officers Association, which is an international organization, the preeminent municipal finance organization in this country, recommends a best practice of having up to 16% in reserve. So we're nowhere near where we should be to really have some security from a financial standpoint. And so one of the strongest messages that I tried to make in my budget message was that we can no longer draw off our reserves, and we need a strategy and a plan to, as quickly as possible, to restore our savings account to where it needs to be.
And because the bond rating companies look at the fund balance in assessing Portsmouth, that would probably relate directly to any kind of loans, to the interest rate we had to pay for loans, I guess.
Absolutely. And so every time we turn around and need to borrow, our bond rating agencies are making an evaluation of our community from a financial standpoint, and they look at things like our reserves to determine the financial strength. And you're absolutely right, that ultimately determines what interest rate we're going to be paying. So the lack of financial security and the lack of funding in our savings account could have serious financial consequences to our taxpayers.
Sure. You mentioned in your message operational audits and why we should conduct them. Could you clarify that a little bit or explain that a little bit?
Well, as a town manager or administrator, I come to this position, believing that there's always room for improvement in terms of both the effectiveness of our operations, but also the efficiency of our operations. And so I have asked the council to set aside an amount of funds every year so that we can take a independent or objective look at the myriad of programs and services that we provide. It's not really meant to criticize the present operations, but recognize that we always can improve. And so that is really the mindset that I bring to this job, that we not only can improve the efficiency of all of our operations, we in fact must, because there is a fiduciary responsibility that we have to our taxpayers. And so I will argue before the Town Council that the relatively modest amount that we're going to be seeking so that we can do an annual operational audit on some facet of our operations is money well spent.
See, as a citizen, I'm kind of amazed that we haven't been doing this all along. It seems like an audit would be a very necessary part of knowing where you are and where you have to go. Another thing you mentioned that's quite interesting, particularly in Portsmouth, is the relationship between the towns and the schools. How does this relate to budget issues?
Well, I think historically, when you look at government, local government, really across the country, there is almost an inherent conflict between the operations of our local schools and our municipal government operations. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, the function of serving on a school committee is very different than the function of serving on the Town Council. The Town Council is the town-wide legislative body. The school committee, by definition, are supposed to be advocates for that one operation of town government. And because of that, and because there's always a limitation on funds and a competition for those funds, more often than not, you find in communities a rift going on between the schools and the local community. I have not, in my short tenure here, felt that that was necessarily the case in Portsmouth, but the reality that so much of the overall town budget is committed to the schools would suggest that it's important, not only from an operational standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, to have a relationship between the town and the schools that is built upon respect and trust and open communication. And so while I'm not at all critical of either the Town Council or the school committee in Portsmouth, I tried to make the point in my budget message that we need to work on improving the relationship, because if we can get the town and the schools on the same page in terms of understanding the realities of living within our means, then the annual give and take and the struggles that you read about every year about a lot of other communities can be put aside. And that's a much healthier relationship in the long run than what we see all too often with the schools fighting the town and the town fighting the school and that type of thing. So I've tried to send a message to the council that it not only makes sense from an operational standpoint, but it is a huge financial issue if we can get the school committee and the school administration on the same page as the Town Council and the Town Administrator.
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody understands how important education is to a town like Portsmouth. Many people move here because of the excellence of our education system. And I've also thought, when you look at both the town operation and the school operation, that there might be some overlap. Perhaps allowing some kind of consolidation of things that are in common that could be done by consolidating parts of these things.
Well, that's the real challenge that we face, and I know that in any one of these issues there's reasons why you can't bring in reforms and you can't change. But our citizens, many of whom are struggling right now economically or financially, watch our town operations, and they probably wonder why the town hall is on one side of the road and the school administration is on the other side of the road, and that we haven't consolidated or collaborated more in areas like information technology or finance or human resources or whatever. You know, they see a police department and a fire department that are literally right next door to each other, and yet they hear that we can't collaborate and consolidate dispatching functions or whatever. They see communities as close as Portsmouth and Middletown are, with not a lot of collaborations together. And they justifiably can say, well, why do you keep asking for more and more tax dollars when you haven't implemented that which is, in some instances, fairly obvious cost savings measures? And so I give Tina Dolan at the Regional Planning Agency a lot of credit, because she has brought together the town manager in Newport and Middletown and myself in a series of meetings to try to talk about how we might be able to collaborate and work together. And so those are all important issues. There always is more that we can do, and you know, our taxpayers and our citizens have the right to demand that we be as efficient as possible with their hard-earned tax dollars.
Well, I know change is always difficult, and it's always tough to be the change agent, which is essentially you are being with this your budget proposal. One of them has to do with recommending to the council that they adopt a budget policy. What kind of policies are you recommending for going forward on the budget?
We don't have in place a formal budget policy which dictates how we're going to raise money, how we're going to spend money, and so I've drafted a budget policy for their consideration. That policy includes things like the fund balance that we've already mentioned, that the goal of going from 8% to 16% be incorporated in an actual budget policy. I've suggested in this budget policy draft that we have a capital trust fund. In other words, an actual fund where we set money aside for future capital projects. I mean, we don't even have a capital trust fund. You've mentioned operational audits, but I want to incorporate that in a formal budget policy where our legislative body, our town council, is directing staff to undertake operational audits with the belief, as I said before, that we can always improve that which we do. The maximizing of interest income is an issue that is part of the budget policy. The practice of providing up-to-date information on a regular basis to our citizens through programs like this should be part of a budget policy. And so I just have incorporated a collection of policies that might seem to be common sense issues to some, but there isn't any place where there has been a formal review by our legislative body and an adoption and therefore a direction about where we're going to go from a budget standpoint.
You know, perhaps slightly off point, but I don't think so, is the idea of if you're developing a policy for long-term sustainability, that implies that there's a vision, a common vision of where we want Portsmouth to go. How do you think we go about getting a consensus on some kind of vision like that?
Are you talking from a land use or a community? From
a community use. What do we want Portsmouth to look like in the next 20 years?
Well, it's an excellent point, and there are obvious financial implications to that question. One of the requests that are included in the budget package that I put before the council is an amount of funds to rewrite our long-range comprehensive plan. We have a comprehensive plan. What I'm struck by, though, is that in terms of the feedback that I've received, there seems to be some conflict between what the comprehensive plan as it now exists says and also what our local zoning allows for and what people say they want for the future of Portsmouth. And so from a planning standpoint, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to have regular conversations not only with the policymakers in town, but more importantly with the citizens of this town to find out what it is that they want for the future of Portsmouth. Some that have been here a lot longer than me might suggest that we've lost some of the uniqueness already, but I think that Portsmouth is a unique town and there is much to protect. But you have to have a vision, and you have to have a plan in place, and you have to have a set of rules and regulations, zoning policies, for example, that are consistent with that plan, or else whatever it is that your policy says and whatever it is your zoning says is what you'll ultimately have. And I want to direct a process which allows citizens to take a look at the future and tell us exactly what it is that they want.
Yeah, I think you really need something like that, because that's the core of where you're going, you know.
Right.
I wish you the best of luck in trying to pull a consensus together on that, but I think that's the way it has to be done, by consensus. It can't be dictated or anything else. You know, one of the things when I looked at your budget message which leapt out at me was you recommend spending $1 million a year on the roads. I can certainly understand why someone would say that. Would you like to kind of
Yes.
explain that a little bit?
Sounds like a lot of money, and $1 million is a lot of money. But the truth is that we have a lot of miles of roads, and there is no mystery. As a matter of fact, we had a workshop before the council that I hope a lot of our citizens get to watch in their busy schedule, because I thought the presenters, who are all experts in the field, did a marvelous job at really explaining in layman's terms about what our liability is and why you need to spend money on roads. But the life of an average road is about 20 or 25 years, and you can do nothing and wait for your roads to break down and then have to rebuild the roads at a very high cost. Or you can implement a plan, an overall plan, that has you maintaining your roads from when they're brand new. The presentation that was given to the council made it very clear about the financial consequences of implementation of a maintenance plan, and also the consequences of not doing it. The truth is that we have a huge financial liability because of our inaction on the roads. And unlike some other assets that we own that if we wanted to, we could just let rot and fall down at some point, the roads will become impassable. I mean, we're not that far off that if we don't start spending real money on our roads, we'll first receive more and more complaints from our citizens about the damage that are being done to their automobiles because of the condition of the roads. But we'll reach a point in time where we are going to hear from our fire and our police department about their ability to continue to go down some of these roads from a public safety standpoint. And so we looked at our overall liability, and as high a number is that $1 million is, and as much money as it is, we're only talking about a basic program. The good part of implementation of a plan is that you start down a different path, which is good. But we made the point before the council is that there's so much damage that's been done to our roads that even if we began to spend $1 million a year for the foreseeable future, that it really would be 6 or 8 years of spending before citizens would start saying, geez, you know, I've really noticed that there's been an improvement to our roads. And the financial liability that exists from years of lack of attention is huge. And our message to the town council is that if we don't start spending money on roads, the cost to restore these roads will be massive. And so from a financial standpoint, I think that the presenters very clearly indicated to the council that we really don't have a choice on this one. It isn't like of some of the other choices that we may have. We have a road stock that has to be maintained, and if we don't, we will really be looking at a community in crisis.
Well, I was quite amazed at the small amounts, literally $150,000 a year, that DPW has been given to do that, to try to maintain some kind of decent road system here. And I can understand why they're sort of in the condition they're in now. This $1 million would address our roads, town roads.
Yes.
What about state roads? Because
well, that's
East
a huge
and
issue.
West Main roads are also...
Absolutely, it's a huge issue. As a matter of fact, one citizen got up and brought up that very point during the council workshop. We need to work as closely as we can with our terrific legislative delegation to try to get the state to commit funding, because as you know, West Main and East Main are not in the greatest of shape, and we need a commitment of state funding because those are our main corridors through town. And so we'll continue to call upon our legislative delegation to see if we can get some funding for those roads.
I also noticed in your budget message that you recommended that we didn't spend to our allowable tax cap. With all of the needs we have, why not? Why not spend to the cap?
Well, I tried to bring up the issue of trust and the relationship that we have from Town Hall to our citizens. And as I said before, there are several reasons why I didn't recommend going to the cap. One is that the cap, as was approved by our state legislature, is not a floor, it's a cap. And so there isn't an assumption on my part that we automatically get an additional 4% every year, but that we start with what we had last year, and then there should be the onus on us to prove to our taxpayers that there is a reason to spend additional money. So the first one's kind of philosophical. The second one is something I mentioned, which is the economy. I mean, I know that there are many people in Portsmouth and the surrounding areas that are truly facing some tough financial times. And you know, they've lost their job, they've had to consider taking their youngsters out of college, they've had to make tough choices, and the future is uncertain for them from a financial standpoint. So I don't take asking for additional dollars lightly, and I don't think that we should, as a community, be insensitive to the realities of the economy. And the last point that I try to make in my budget message is I don't think that we have proven ourselves. I don't think that we've gone far enough to try to save money and economize. And without doing that, how do you go to the citizens and say, I want the maximum amount that I can get from you, without having proven that we have tried at least to become more efficient?
I know another issue that you addressed a little bit in your budget message was pension funding. A lot of the towns that are in dire financial straits in Rhode Island right now are really in way over their head on funding of their pension plans. How do we really stand?
We have a system that's about 55 or 60% funded, and I guess that's the good news compared to other communities in Rhode Island. But it is a ticking time bomb, and we need to address the liability there. You know, you do it one of two ways. Either you put more money into the system, or you make changes to the benefits package itself. So we'll be working on that in the future.
It seems like we recently had an auditor look at this fund and tell us where we are. As I recall, Portsmouth is not in that bad a condition.
Well, compared to other towns, we aren't, but we still have about a $20 or $25 million liability. So it's something that we really do have to address.
Okay, John, that's about all the time I think we have for today's session, but I'm sure we'll have much more to say about budget issues and other issues in Portsmouth, and we can defer them to future sessions. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope that you will watch for the next edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. Goodbye.
Child and Family Services has been caring for the community since 1866. Our new Community Center on John Clark Road in Middletown offers help and support to families from Newport County and beyond. Programs include Sandpiper's Early Learning Center for infants to preschool ages children, counseling services, support programs for teens, elder care services, and more. Child and Family is where people turn for help with personal and family emergencies and crises. To learn more, visit childandfamilyri.com or call this number.
You're watching PEG RI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.